At its height, the British Empire ruled over a quarter of the world's population and covered nearly a quarter of the Earth's landmass. It was the empire on which the sun never set, a sprawling global force that touched every continent and left a mark on nearly every nation. But how did this vast empire emerge from a small, rainy island off the coast of Europe? The story of the British Empire is not just one of battles and borders, but of ambition, trade, invention, oppression, resistance, and legacy. It all began in the late 15th century, when European powers like Spain and Portugal were racing across oceans, carving up the world for God, gold, and glory. England, relatively late to the game, launched its first major voyage in 1497, when John Cabot sailed west and reached the shores of North America. He didn't find riches or spices, but he planted a symbolic flag that would echo across centuries. Over the next 100 years, English privateers and adventurers like Francis Drake and Walter Raleigh sailed under royal charters, challenging Spanish dominance and seeking new lands to claim. These early expeditions led to the founding of fragile colonies, like Roanoke, which mysteriously vanished, and Jamestown, which barely survived, but they marked the beginning of England's transformation into an imperial power. By the early 1600s, England began building something more enduring: trade empires. In 1600, Queen Elizabeth I granted a royal charter to the East India Company, giving it power to trade and eventually rule in Asia. In the Caribbean, sugar plantations were established using enslaved African labor, generating massive wealth for Britain and fueling a transatlantic system of trade known as the Triangular Trade. As the 17th century progressed, British settlements grew in North America, the West Indies, and along the African coast. The empire was still small, but its ambitions were growing. The 18th century was a turning point. The British fought rival empires, especially France, for dominance around the globe. The 7 Years' War, often called the First World War, was fought on multiple continents. Britain emerged victorious in 1763, gaining Canada from France, large parts of India, and supremacy in global trade. But success came at a price. Just over a decade later, Britain faced rebellion in its American colonies. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence marked the beginning of the American Revolutionary War. By 1783, Britain had lost its 13 colonies, a humiliating blow. But far from ending the empire, the loss of America marked the beginning of a shift. Britain doubled down on its presence in India, Africa, and the Pacific. During the Napoleonic Wars, Britain's naval power grew unmatched, and by the early 1800s, it had seized key territories like Cape Colony, Ceylon, and territories in the Caribbean. With Napoleon's defeat in 1815, Britain emerged not just as a European victor, but as a global superpower. The 19th century was the golden age of the British Empire. Under Queen Victoria, Britain ruled over one of the largest empires in history. India, often called the jewel in the crown, was both a resource and a responsibility. The British built railways, roads, and administrative systems across the subcontinent, but also imposed taxes, exploited resources, and sparked uprisings, most notably the Indian Rebellion of 1857, after which the British Crown took direct control. In Africa, Britain took part in the so-called Scramble for Africa, claiming Egypt, Sudan, South Africa, and more. In the Pacific, it colonized Australia and New Zealand. Across the globe, the British flag symbolized law and order to some, and conquest and control to others. The empire was justified through ideas like the white man's burden and civilizing missions. But in reality, it often brought violent suppression of local populations, economic exploitation, and cultural erasure. Yet it also exported the English language, British legal systems, and parliamentary governance, elements still embedded in many nations today. As the 20th century dawned, Britain faced growing tensions. Nationalist movements rose in Ireland, India, and Egypt. The empire was vast but brittle. Then came World War I. Over 1 million Indian soldiers fought for Britain. Troops from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Africa, and the Caribbean served across the battlefields of Europe. The war tested the strength of the empire and exposed the contradictions at its core. After the war, Britain gained even more territory under League of Nations mandates, including Palestine and Iraq. But the cracks were showing. The interwar period saw economic depression, unrest in colonies, and growing calls for independence. Then came World War II. Again, the empire rallied to Britain's defense. But the cost was enormous. India's independence movement, led by Gandhi and Nehru, intensified. In 1947, after centuries of British rule, India and Pakistan gained independence, an event marked by both celebration and devastating partition violence. Other colonies followed. In the 1950s and 60s, Britain decolonized much of Africa and the Caribbean, often after bloody struggles. Kenya, Nigeria, Jamaica, Ghana, one by one, former colonies became independent nations. In 1982, the Falklands War reminded the world that Britain still held overseas territories, but it was a shadow of its former imperial self. In 1997, the handover of Hong Kong to China symbolically marked the end of the British Empire. Today, what remains is the Commonwealth, a group of 56 countries, many of which share language, law, and history, but no longer political control. The legacy of the British Empire is complex. It built global trade networks, spread English and ideas of democracy, but also caused immense suffering through colonization, slavery, and cultural domination. Borders drawn by imperial hands still fuel conflict. Historical wounds remain raw in places like Ireland, India, and parts of Africa. And yet, the empire shaped the modern world. Its influence is found in legal systems, parliaments, sports, education, and infrastructure. The British Empire has ended, but its story is far from over. Its history lives on in every corner of the globe, in every language spoken, in every institution, modeled after British ideals. And as we look at today's world, we must ask, what does it mean to inherit a legacy built on both glory and grief? If you found this journey through time fascinating, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. What surprised you most about the empire? And which civilization should we explore next? Because history isn't just about the past, it's the blueprint for our future.